Hi, this is Jake at Canadian Cutting Edge, and today I've got an Inron knife. Hopefully you can see that label there, perhaps on the blade. It's a nice full-size folder from a Chinese company named Inron, and it has a couple features that are interesting and one feature that I've never seen before on any other folder, at least not quite like this. So you might be interested in this knife. Stick around, we'll move the camera to the desktop mode and we'll take a good look at this big folder. As I mentioned in the opening, this is indeed a full-size folder. What we have is a handle, if you include the glass breaker. It's just over 4 3/4 inches long. It's like almost 1.5 inches from wide when the blade is closed. And when you're using the handle, it's like 1 inch at the narrowest in the front and a little bit less than 1 inch, like 7/8 back in here. And then a belly that comes out to 1/8 over 1 inch, so 1 1/8 inches. For those of you like centimeters, I'm talking about 3 centimeters right here at the belly, 2.3 centimeters in this back handle heel choil. I keep forgetting what to call that. And over here at the front, we've got like 26 centimeters in this, 26 millimeters, 2.6 centimeters over here. We've got a blade edge that is 9 centimeters long. I'm talking about the cutting area. That's 3.5 inches. It's a little bit longer from the very end of the handle to the tip of the blade. It's like 3 5/8 for that distance. Not a big deal. And how thick is this blade stock? Because it's a nice heavy blade stock. 3.36 millimeters. That is 0.133 inches. So that's 1/8 of an inch plus a tiny bit. Nice, thick, heavy, solid blade stock. It's made of 9 CR13 MOV. Hopefully, you can see it written on the blade right there. Hollow grind, a nice big hollow grind. It goes from the tip, oh yes, 5/8 at least, all the way up to where the blade stock comes to its thickest. So it's got a nice deep area that's thin, which I like. A nice strong tip. This wedge here, helps make the blade look a little bit better. It doesn't really add any, quality to the knife, except for it might make it a little easier to use in a stabbing type of motion. It's a good looking knife. There you've got their logo. It looks like a some kind of raptor bird with 3 wings coming out. This is the Inron MY802. This knife is very hard to find. The only place I can find to get this knife is at Xduct, exduct.com. It's a Chinese store, a little bit like Fast Tech. The only one that they have in stock has a fake Damascus blade. It's got the same 9 CR13 MOV, but it's sort of made to look like Damascus. And they're charging 22 and change in US dollars for this knife. And this MY802 impresses me in a few ways and disappoints me in a few ways. So let's talk about those. Let's talk about the good about this blade, this knife. First is the blade. I like the blade. For the price point that this knife comes in, it's a really good hollow grind, a nice blade shape, lots of huge belly, nice flat area to work. You can hold on, you've got a very good grip. You can hold on to it very well to do some fine cutting if you need to. And it's got a really strong blade that you can do some hard slicing and hard cutting. And it just works fine for whatever you want to put it through as a normal EDC style knife. So the steel on the blade part is good. The pivot is smooth and the action is just very, very good on it. It locks up completely tight, no play any which way, not even barely a hint at all. And I'm very thankful for that, because this proprietary pivot screw, would cause me some grief. But at this price point, I might be tempted just to grind a line through there and turn it into a Phillips screw to adjust it. This knife is, I really like it, but this is a workhorse knife for me. It's not a beauty queen in any way, shape, or form. Although it's, it doesn't look bad at all, it does have a few things that make it just a workhorse. So we talked about the blade. Let's talk about the handle shape and everything. I really like this handle for hard work. We've got this end where it gets bigger, this nice choil at the front, when you're in a nice belly in the middle. When your hand is locked in here to use the knife, either hand, you've got a rock solid grip. This gentle jimping on the top here on the blade makes sense. It works. It doesn't get hot at all. Hand feels good. The grip feels good in either hand. The grip feels good in almost any kind of position that you want to, any type of grip that you want to hold it in. So the grip is really good. This is G10. They did a good texture on it. So the handle itself is very good. That's another one of its strengths. Let's talk about this clip. It's tip-up clip. It's only right-hand tip-up. They didn't put any other options to move this clip around. In my opinion, this clip is definitely an afterthought on this knife. That just doesn't make sense, does it? It would make sense if there was a lanyard hole right there. Otherwise, this blade shape just, the handle, the clip kind of base shape just doesn't make any sense, does it? And there is no lanyard hole. That goes onto the list of the things that I don't like about this knife. While I personally use lanyards very infrequently, a lot of people do use them, and they could have easily put a lanyard hole on this knife. There's no reason that they weren't needing to do that. It is sort of an open pillar construction without the pillars. It's just sort of open. We've got a pillar right here that holds this. I'll talk about this in a second. But then we've just got some tailstock here that holds the end together with these two screws. And that's plastic, actually, not G10. There's G10 on the scales, and this is plastic in between. And that's what holds the glass breaker, this plastic piece in the middle. And that glass breaker you would take in and out with a small sort of dowel-shaped piece of steel. A small drill would fit in there, and you'd be able to loosen it off or tighten it with that. So yeah, it looks good. It's made to stay together. I like how they use the flush screws in here instead of the 3D kind of bumpy screws, like they did on the clip. Oh, so I didn't finish talking about the clip, did I? The clip is very strong, very adequate for this knife. I don't like that it's not a very deep carry. Your pants will be sticking out if you count this glass breaker. It'll be sticking out almost an inch, very close to an inch out of your pocket. They could have made it higher up with almost zero effort. It would have been very easy for them to make this clip higher up, but they didn't. Let's turn to this glass breaker. It's a strong, rock-solid glass breaker. It's a big, heavy piece of steel. It's got almost 1/8 of an inch thickness on the side, and then it goes up from there. It's really hard to see. I'm going to try to get this to zoom in and focus. You can see that tungsten tip on there, and that's a really good thing. But you can also see that when they soldered it on, they burned the steel, and they didn't clean it up properly. In my books, they should have thrown that out and redone it. Just do it all over again. But it's totally functional. There's nothing wrong with it. That piece of tungsten is not loose or anything. It's just cosmetic. And, so I don't use glass breakers. I've never broken a piece of glass in an emergency or needed to use focus. or needed to use a glass breaker in an emergency situation. But you never know, if that kind of emergency did come up sometime, you'd want a glass breaker that works, right? This one doesn't feel bad. It's not, there's no grips where you hold this knife that it's going to hurt your hand, except for this grip. But they've done it at such a shallow angle here that it doesn't really hurt the thumb. If you did a bunch of striking 7 or 8 times, yeah, that would start to hurt your thumb. So if you're one that tends to do this kind of grip and striking down into stabbing things, you're breaking ice or I don't know, whatever you're doing in this kind of motion, you're going to want to remove that glass breaker, and then it's going to be very, very comfortable. Okay, we're finally getting to this thing here. It's got a thumb nick right there to open it up, and it is a Phillips screwdriver or a prying tool or a self-defense tool. If you improvise or wrap your hand around it this way, you've got something there that's going to persuade somebody to do what you want without being lethal. I guess it could be lethal if you struck them in the head with that or something. So it's multiple uses. The main thing I like about this is that it's fairly wide in there, and it's a nice, thick, heavy piece of steel. Instead of being tempted to use this blade, even though it's got thick stock on it, instead of being tempted to use that blade to do some prying, here's a good tool for that. So you can hold it in a number of different ways. You have a lot of torque if you want to drive a screw in. Let's say that's not a flathead screw, but if it was, you could really use a lot of torque to drive a screw into a piece of wood or whatever. As long as it's a flat Phillips, not Phillips. Why am I saying Phillips? Phillips is that star shape, the X shape. This is just a flat screwdriver. Nice prying tool, very strong. That's a plus. When it's not in use, it's out of the way, but it adds weight to the knife, doesn't it? This knife isn't light. It's 5.3 ounces. That's 149 grams. It could be heavier for its size, but it's not light at all. They did do some minor skeletonizing. You can see just inside there, inside the knife, right in there, there's a little bit of skeletonizing there. I'm glad they took off at least that much, because at 5.3 ounces, a lot of people will say this knife is just too heavy for me. And I get that. This is not a very common kind of EDC for me either. This would be something that I would take if I knew I was going to be working for a while. And I'll need a tool like this. Let's do some cutting tests now. I've got some cable here. Came from my son's Xbox game controller. Cuts through that very easily. No problem at all. If you've not seen me do this test with this wire before, let me show you. There's a lot of wire to this wire. That's all steel. There's a piece of copper in there. There's some steel wiring, or aluminum at least. There's this sheath that's on the covering the inside wires. There's copper wire that's got covering, and then there's this papery string. So it's got a lot of stuff going on, and yet it just cuts through that, no problem at all. Let's try it on some belting, and this is 1 inch wide. Zips through that stuff, no problem at all. Let's try it on some paper. This is just regular paper. Yeah, see, no problem. It cuts quite well. So the cutting edge, the way they've done the profile is good. The hollow grind helps it to go through just about anything else you want. Not a problem. As long as you want to cut something that knives are supposed to be cutting. Okay, now that we've done our cutting and we've done everything else, let's summarize. What do I like about this knife? I like this blade shape. I like how heavy and strong it is. I like how well it cuts. I like the jimping on here, really good. I like the general shape of the handle and how good the grip is on it and how easy it is to hold it in multiple ways without getting any hot spots at all. I like the liner lock. It locks up perfectly for a brand new liner lock. It's got lots of time to move over, and yet the thickness of the liner lock has fully engaged the blade. I like the pry tool, this flat screwdriver. That's a really good addition. You can do so many things with it. And I really like this detent. If I haven't told you yet, the detent holds it very stiff. There's no way you're going to shake this knife, and I tried very hard to shake it to make this blade come loose. It doesn't come loose at all. So this will pass through the CBSA tests, I believe, with flying colors. Hopefully all of them are as good with their detent as this one is. Okay, what's the bad? What do I not really like about this knife? I don't like these thumb studs. They get too narrow at the top, and it's not comfortable to actuate the thumb stud always, because you're pushing with your thumb right there on a very thin part of the thumb stud right at the top. It's narrow, which means it sort of impacts more at a point. Don't like that. They could put on a better clip, a deeper carry, a clip that looks like it's made for this knife, and the proprietary pivot screw. I no like the proprietary pivot screw. So all in all, it's a knife that if you need a good, big, hard-working knife, you should consider this. If you're just not interested in a big, hard-working knife, give this thing a pass. There's nothing that's super special about it enough to add it to your collection. But if you're looking for something this size for hard use, give this guy a consideration. If you hit like, I really like. Hey, we both can like. Share this video with somebody you think is looking for this kind of knife. And in the comments below, let me know what questions you have, what you think of this knife, anything you want to share, any feelings about this blade or other knife kind of stuff. And remember, always cut towards your chum and not your thumb.